Hey guys, what's up? Dingo Crikey here with another commentary video. This time I'm going to be discussing the official images of the Transformers Combiner Wars Victorion Combiner figures. So here's another video on the Combiner Wars line, as there have been a lot of reveals as of late. And this one was suggested by user Toyman1976. Thanks a lot for the suggestion, it's really appreciated. It's definitely cool to know people enjoy discussing the Generations toy line, because it doesn't always get as much attention as stuff with the cartoons or the movies, but a lot more people seem to be interested in the Generations line ever since it started doing Combiner Wars. So as long as people are interested, I'll keep doing videos on it, because Hasbro just keeps revealing more and more of this Combiner Wars stuff, and a lot of it's really interesting. The Generation 2 reveals and now these Victorion combiners are almost more interesting than a lot of the reveals we got from the convention a little while back with Prowl, Sunstreakers, Skylynx. A lot of these ones are really cool. This set is particularly interesting because these are not Generation 1 or even Armada, Beast Wars, whatever kind of characters. They're new characters who were just revealed in the comics, an all Fembot combiner team, and I believe it was also one of those fan project things that turned into actual figures, sort of like Windblade. I don't know a whole lot of background on these characters. As I mentioned, they've just been recently added to the Transformers universe as far as I know, but obviously we can still discuss the toys. And one more disclaimer I want to throw out there: I believe this is not going to be a mass retail release. It's probably going to be something like those upcoming Generation 2 combiners, where they're not some really pricey exclusive, but we're probably only going to be able to get them online in a box set. So without further ado, let's take a look at the images. So the first figure we have is Deluxe Class Dustup. I believe that's how you say it. And this is obviously a repaint of Dead End, Wild Rider, Prowl. I don't even know how many versions of this mold we're going to have at this point, but it is a cool mold, and this color scheme doesn't look bad on it. I may as well give my general thoughts on this color scheme while I'm on this figure, since most of them stick to it with some variations. Personally, it isn't my favorite color combination, but it definitely gets kudos for being unique and being a combiner set that is going to keep a consistent color scheme. Not that I mind what the other ones do, but this is a nice change of pace. And with the color schemes being unique, I feel as if it gives these characters a certain vibe that we don't really get too often, which is cool and will help this combiner team stand out amongst its peers. With that said, I do like the integration of aqua blue, and I appreciate that they're trying to mix it with red, which isn't really a color you would think to mix this color of blue with, and it simply works better on some figures than others. Here, I just feel like the red dominates the body and the upper legs way too much. While the lack of paint applications does look a little bit more intentional than some other ones that just look like laziness, it still does look kind of jarring. I certainly wouldn't say it looks terrible, but just not the best color scheme we've seen on this mold, and I think they could have done a little bit better. Still, the arm paint looks really nice, and the leg paint applications are basic, but those look pretty cool too. Now let's talk about the remolding though. There's a little bit of remolding done for this figure, but I think it's really all that was necessary, and it looks really nice. Head sculpt looks a lot like Nightbird, but it's not one we see a whole lot, so I think that's definitely pretty cool. And I really like what they did with the hands. Not only painting them silver, which doesn't throw the color scheme off in my opinion, it's just a nice little compliment, but also remolding the hands to not only get rid of the fisted hands, which personally I'm not a big fan of, but also to characterize her as a member of this team, and I don't know if I want to say give her a more eloquent look, because all of these are still pretty blocky figures, but I do think it gives some character to the figure. Also, a very cool design for the weapon. Not totally sure what it is, some sort of hand axe thing. But most of all, I'm glad that they're just not reusing some of the previous weapons. That's really cool. Vehicle mode, not a whole lot to say there. It's unfortunate there wasn't any remolding as far as I can tell, but these colors look okay on the vehicle. Once again, not the best we've seen, but they look pretty cool. So that's all I have to say about Dustup. Next we move on to Jumpstream, who is a repaint and remold of Deluxe Class Breakdown. Personally, I like the look of Jumpstream much better than Dustup. Not only does she have much more paint applications, but she also does not have an overflow of one color. There's a lot of aqua blue, then red, and even silver in more places than just the hand, and it helps just balance out the figure. Very cool in that aspect. This color scheme also looks really good on this design. I don't know if it's just the way they painted it, but I think it works out pretty well. The aqua blue was kind of cool on G2 Breakdown, but I feel like this one did it much better. Also, we have a few points of remolding going on here. Obviously, the hands are different, no longer fisted. That is a huge plus. Once again, they're silver and have a little bit more of an eloquent shape. The chest is also different from the original Breakdown one. I don't know if this was used on one of the other Breakdown repaints. Nevertheless, it does help the figure look unique. One of the big points is obviously the head sculpt. I don't really know how I feel about it. I don't feel as though it fits the body as good as it did with Dustup. However, I can obviously appreciate the new head sculpt and one that is very unique. Head sculpt also has a good amount of paint apps, though I'm not crazy about the red lips. I know it does kind of mesh with the rest of the colors, but they stand out just a little bit too much. As far as other remolding, we obviously have a different weapon. It looks to be a small shield and a cool one of that. Really nice paint application and detail. The only thing I really don't like here is that the way she holds it looks a little weird, but I think we've seen Transformers hold weapons in weirder fashions. Also, the car mode is very cool looking. Not a whole lot to say there. No evident remolding except that little front piece from the robot mode. But I feel that the color scheme also does look good here. So overall, I have a few little pet peeves with this figure, but I think it looks great. Really spiffy way to remold this into another character. So moving on to the next one, we have Voyager Class Pyra Magna. Outside of sharing red with Hotspot, this figure looks incredibly different. And while I'm speaking of red, I may as well mention that it seems to be a more dominant color with this figure, but unlike Dustup, I think they do a nice job of integrating the aqua blue and silver in places to really balance the color scheme out, and overall I think it looks pretty nice on this figure. Though the red might still be a little overpowering just because we have a lot of it on the lower legs and a ton of it in the vehicle mode. Still, I think they do a nice job on the color scheme. The paint application is pretty different from that of Hotspot, you know, colored in different places, that kind of thing. And I also think the remolding does a nice job of getting across the theme of this figure. From the weapon to the hand remolding, and a really nice head sculpt we have on this one. And almost forgot to mention the chest, which also looks really nice. In robot mode, I think it gets across the feel very well. In vehicle mode, I'm not feeling it so much. I was kind of getting the impression that these ones are supposed to have a little bit more of a mystical, I don't know, Atlantean feel or something. And obviously these are modern Earth vehicles, so you're not totally going to have that, but I feel like this is such a characterized vehicle, being something like a fire truck, and it isn't streamlined like the others, so it's really hard to pass with the theme. The vehicle itself, though, looks really cool. The abundant red, though I said I'm not the biggest fan of it, does work well for this vehicle. So I'm going to say Pyro Magna also looks great, and it's always awesome to see more uses of this mold. Next, Legends Class Rust-Dust. If you've heard previous videos of mine where I talk about the Combiner Wars line, you know I'm not a big fan of this mold altogether. But this is the first time that I actually don't mind it. While it still is, in my opinion, a kind of ugly mold, the color scheme does a fabulous job to cover it up. I would actually say this is my favorite of the individual color schemes. While it still contains the essential colors of the rest of them, it gives the red a break and really doubles up on the black, which looks really cool against the aqua blue and then just the plain light blue in the eyes, and even the red doesn't look so bad in there, though it would have been neat to see what it would look like without it. Especially in the motorcycle mode, though I kind of like that little accent. While I'm there, gotta say I love the way this motorcycle mode looks. I don't know if it's the color scheme altogether, or just that complement of the crack in the glass along with the Cybertronian writing. Really eye-catching and definitely in a good way. Can't say this one looks the most in theme, but I think they did do a pretty good job on this mold. Maybe this kind of color scheme, something more subtle with the aqua blue, was the best bet for it originally, as I think if they overburdened her with a lot of red as they do with the other figures, yeah, this would be just about as bad as the other renditions of this mold. Moving on from there, we have Deluxe Class Skyburst. This is another one of those molds that I'm just not so crazy about. And while the color scheme does help the mold a bit, it's really lacking in paint applications. It does look to have a fair amount for a regular Combiner Wars figure, but the arms are still very bland. Lower arms just being aqua blue, upper arms red. Lower body having a lot of red going into the upper legs and knees, which have even more red, give off a kind of bland feel where maybe they could have integrated more silver and black in here, which other than on the face and the front of what becomes a helicopter, really isn't all that present, which isn't a good thing for what, in my opinion, is one of the most bland Combiner Wars robot modes. However, there is some remolding to speak of, namely, we don't have the missiles on the arms anymore. Instead, they've been replaced by mini-wings, which don't look great in jet mode. The missiles honestly did a better job covering up the arm look, but honestly, I'm just glad to get all of the missiles off of this arm for once. Also, the head sculpt is obviously remolded, and I think it looks really nice. Now, despite some of the bland characteristics of this toy, the weapon is definitely not one of them. What a wicked, yet kind of pretty looking sword. It almost looks like part of a butterfly wing, or at least a dragonfly. It's very, very cool looking. Like the fade from blue into silver and then the darker gray on the handle of the sword. It's very stylized and unique looking, and while oftentimes I do prefer interchangeable weapons, in a case like this where they're coming as a box set, there's something kind of unique in the story, it is really cool to see them doing such a good job on the stylistic weapons. As far as the helicopter mode, kind of just looks like a hodgepodge of a bunch of aqua blue and red. Can't say I'm liking it too much. Overall, this figure does some things right. The sword is awesome looking, but overall, not a big fan of it. Last of the combiners, we have Stormclash. Wait, didn't we just leave this party? No, this is actually a separate figure. As you can see, the head sculpt is different, but that's almost about it. Outside of some minor paint differences, this is pretty much the same figure as the last one. At least as far as I can tell, even the paint differences are just basically flipped, and I'll bring up a picture for you guys to see them in comparison to each other. So here you can see Skyburst on the left and Stormclash on the right. Their heads are different, but almost everything else is the same. The paint differences, I'm pretty sure, are just flipped, as you can see with the details on the body, and you'll be able to see more with the image in helicopter mode. As you can see in these angles, they do have some different paint placement, but from what we can tell of robot mode, I would think a lot of the details are just flipped. On one hand, you could really hate that. Not only did they reuse the same mold, not particularly a favorite mold amongst many people, myself included, but they pretty much did the same thing 2 times in the same set. But in another way, it's kind of cool. It makes the team more uniform, gives sort of twins within the team, and will probably look really great in the combined form. So initially I was a little disappointed to see this, especially with how similar they look, but I can see some pros here. One definitely being that we're getting another one of these swords, which is really cool. So finally, we move on to the combined form to see if it's all worth it, and here we have Victorion. Had some complaints about the individual figures, obviously them reusing the helicopter mold twice, not the best color scheme to reuse on a lot of figures. All of that is pretty much remedied here, at least upon seeing these images. I mean, whoa, this is like one of the coolest looking combiners I've seen in this line yet. There's just so much here to talk about. The color scheme, obviously them all being uniform, worked out really nicely, but also, though those colors didn't look good on each individual figure, they just look great on this big combined form. I don't know if it's that they look good on a big build like this or what, but they look really cool. And there's also a lot of black present, especially in the torso, silver all throughout, so it's not just the red and aqua blue. Very cool looking. Also, great remolded head. Not only did we get one, but a very unique and unorthodox looking one. But really cool, especially because it looks like she has some sort of a crown on her head that goes really nicely with the whole theme. And let's get to talking about that with how they did the hands and the feet. Totally different hand and feet pieces we have here. Not the big clunky hands of the past, and a more eloquent look to the feet. Looks very cool, and I definitely like that they made them silver to kind of bring that out of the color scheme a little bit more. Giant sword, just magnificent looking. I mean, whoa, so unique. Looks like it's put together really well, at least from these images. I guess we'll have to see when we get like in-hand images, but from here it looks great. Really like how all the weapons combine together, and most of them look pretty good in the individual robots' form, so don't have a whole lot to complain about there. If this was just a box set of all of these individual figures, I would buy it, but it wouldn't be nearly as exciting. This combined form makes it a hands down, I'll throw my money out to get this. Very nicely done, Hasbro. If I had one complaint, it would be that the red is still a little bit ugly, but really, great design. Can't complain much. So, that wraps up my thoughts on it. You guys can leave yours in the comment section below. Are you as optimistic about this box set? What do you think about some of the recent combiners like this Victorion set, along with the G2 versions taking up more fruity, untraditional color schemes? Or maybe these recent revelations, for better or worse, have kind of changed your perception of the Combiner Wars line? Leave it all in the comment section below. As always, you can also leave any topic suggestions you might have. As I said, this was a topic suggested by a user, so I definitely look out for them, and I really appreciate when you guys give them. It could be on Transformers 5, Combiner Wars, or even an old Transformers cartoon. Leave it in the comment section below, and remember to keep up with the channel for regular Transformers news and commentary. You can also check out my playlist where I categorize different Transformer topics, and you can follow my Twitter account for updates on recent Transformers and Bionicle buys or other cool stuff. Anyways, that's all I have to say for this one. Stay tuned, thanks for watching, and have a good one, guys. I will see you soon.